Spring training is just a few weeks away, and it feels like the Giants still have work to do to get their roster where it needs to be. So let's look at some of the top trade candidates for the Giants to make this season interesting.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, back to 5 at some point in February after spring training gets underway, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Check us out there. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And coming up on today's show, like I said, spring training is 20 days away. I think I did the math here correctly. I think February 11th is pitchers and catchers reporting. And so that is soon. And so when we talk about the off season, yeah, I mean, spring training kind of counts. And the Giants last year signed like Jorge Soler, Matt Chapman, and Blake Snell after spring training got started. And so I'm not saying that nothing can happen after that, but is their heavy lifting done? Are they going to spend more? These are very relevant questions. And, you know, looking at the Giants' payroll, I think I want to look at their projected payroll and where it ranks. I mean, it doesn't rank near the top. It's number 12 at a projected payroll of $181 million. And their luxury tax payroll is a bit higher than that in terms of the ranking. It's $222 million, and that is 369th in baseball. So that's a good thing that they're in the top 10 in luxury tax payroll. So I'm happy to see that. But I think most importantly, this doesn't look like an obvious winning team, right? And they weren't a winning team last year. They haven't been a winning team since 2021, and they lost Blake Snell. They did get Willy Adames and Justin Verlander, but I don't think it's enough. I think there's work to do. And if you look at the roster, like who's the DH? Like who's going to play DH most of the time on this current roster? It's not entirely clear. And so, yeah, we turn to the trade market. MLB Trade Rumors. We turn to the trade market because it's probable that they're not going to make a major free agent acquisition, especially when you consider the best players rejected the qualifying offer and there would be draft pick losses on top of draft pick losses. They already are doing that with Adames, and they did it with 2 players last year with Snell and Chapman. So I just don't see it with Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman. Santander is off the board, and he was another qualifying offer guy. So anyway, this list by MLB Trade Rumors, it's important that we understand that when they rank the top 20 trade candidates, it's not based on who's the best player. They try to do it based on who's the most likely to be traded, I believe is their criteria here. And so, you know, reading through their little, let's revisit the trade market and run through some of the top names who could change hands. There's no way it's ranked in order of the best players because they have Marcus Stroman at number 1. So it's a combination of like likelihood to be dealt, and maybe that's actually the number 1 factor. But I'm just going to kind of run through it and see who's a fit and who's not. And so Marcus Stroman, starting pitcher, I think a lot of Giants fans really like this guy. He's not very good anymore, and he did pitch. He had a 3.09 road ERA, which is relevant, I guess. .531 at home, so maybe Yankee Stadium gave him some problems. But I'm just going to cross out starting pitchers here because I think the Giants have enough starting pitching when you factor in their young arms. And it's pretty clear to me that they want these young arms to break through. Like, you have to give them a road to playing. And if you start bringing in more starting pitchers on top of Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander, Jordan Hicks, and say you were to trade for Marcus Stroman, there's not even room for Kyle Harrison, Hayden Birdsong, Landon Roop, and then Mason Black and Tristan Beck and all these guys. And so I think that they're fine with how it is now. It's kind of sketchy on paper because of injury risk, but that's where the young arms come in. When you look at like Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander, Jordan Hicks, injury concern, but that's where your young arms come in. So any starting pitcher on this list, I'm just going to write them off. Number 2 on the list is Nolan Arenado, and I'm writing him off completely too because he's a third baseman, and the Giants have just extended Matt Chapman. They're not going to be in search of a third baseman for a long time. And, there's talk of Nolan Arenado playing first base if he were to be traded, but that just tanks his value. Like, his bat, if you look at the numbers, he's really fallen off offensively, and he's also fallen off defensively, actually. But, so much of his value comes from playing third base well. Actually, I may be thinking of someone else when I say he's fallen off defensively. Yeah, no, he's still really good. I apologize. I was thinking of somebody else. Manny Machado, I think, is who I was thinking of. But he, playing first base with projections of just being barely above average offensively doesn't make any sense to acquire a guy who's signed for 3 years and $74 million. Rockies are paying $10 million of that, so 3 years, $64 million for a decent hitting first baseman. No, thank you. Next on the list is Dylan Cease. Cease is very good, and he would make the Giants a lot better. But like I said, I'm just writing off starting pitchers because I really think they want to give opportunities to the young arms because you have to give opportunities. Otherwise, they don't break through, and they're in a position where they need young players to break through. So there are areas they could upgrade, but it's not starting. Well, they could upgrade for sure at starting pitcher, but I think there are other areas that are more important. And that brings us to number 4. And this is someone I'm going to spend much more time focusing on here. And that's Luis Arráez of the San Diego Padres. So it's worth kind of looking at what MLB Trade Rumors here wrote about Dylan Cease because they're on the same team, Cease and Arraez. And what they wrote about Cease was it may seem counterintuitive for the Padres to trade Cease just 1 year after acquiring him, but the Friars, Padres, payroll situation has changed. San Diego is looking to trim spending as ownership has turned over from the late Peter Seidler to his siblings. San Diego uncharacteristically hasn't made a single signing or trade this winter despite need in left field, in the rotation, on the bench, and at designated hitter. Then they say trading Cease would bring back a controllable option for one of those positions while also shedding his $13.75 million salary, funds that could be reallocated to another of those needs. So that brings us to Arraez, and they say the same factors that make Cease a trade candidate are largely applicable to Arraez. He's a free agent next season. The 3-time batting champ will earn $14 million in 2025. He's not a strong defender, nor does he hit for power or run well, but Arraez makes contact at an elite rate and is probably the game's best pure hitter. Moving him would create flexibility to spend on other areas and perhaps bring back some MLB help at another position. And that's where the Giants could come into play here. I think that Luis Arraez is overrated in some ways, underrated in other ways. And so I'm going to explain what I mean and why I think he is such a good fit and probably the best fit on this list for the Giants. How realistic is it, though? We'll get into all of that in just a minute and before we do. Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. All right, as promised, we are going to continue to take a look at the trade candidates list. We'll get into some Giants who make the list as well a little bit later on and discuss, we're talking about acquiring players in a trade. So of course you do have to give something up in return. So are those players who could be a factor in a return for the players who make sense as acquisitions? Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Coming up later this week, one more episode. We've got a lot of possibilities for where we're going to go with that episode. Some will get pushed into next week. We've got mailbag questions left over. We've got these new projections that have come out called ATC, which are some of the best. And I want to take a look at the Giants projections there. Also, this very interesting topic, MLB Trade Rumors threw out, talking about a salary cap in the next collective bargaining agreement. And if you would trade the whole 2027 season in order to get a salary cap and floor. You would assume that if there's a cap, there would be a floor as well. So anyway, lots coming up later, but let's talk about Luis Arráez. So the reason, first of all, the roster fit for a Luis Arráez. Let's just discuss that. So right now, as it as it stands, the Giants have, LaMonte Wade Jr. is penciled in at first base. And I think that he's underrated and people kind of complain too much about the fact that he's your starting first baseman. I think he's a good player. He does show up on this list. We'll read the review. Actually, he does show up on this list, and we'll read what they have to say about him, kind of an objective opinion. But also there was a MLB Trade Rumors mailbag that came out today, and they wrote that Wade doesn't have platoon issues. And I was like, what? Yes, he does. And I looked it up, and because I hadn't checked in a while, I guess. But sure enough, he's been about 40% below average in his career against lefties. So he is your first baseman, caveat, against right-handed pitching, not against left-handed pitching. So right now, the depth chart looks like Wade at first against righties and Wilmer Flores at first against lefties. And so what is your DH situation looking like in that event, right? You're looking at right now, Wilmer Flores probably being the DH against righties with Wade at first, and against lefties, probably Gerard Encarnacion. And I just don't think that's a very strong thing unless they really believe that Gerard, I'm sure pronounced Gerard, Encarnacion is going to be a really good hitter. He's out of options, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But Arraez would solve the problem. In that write-up, they mentioned he's not a strong defender, so he's a very weird player, very unique. It's not often you see he's 5'10", 175. It's not often and he doesn't hit for power. It's not often you see a guy like that and you're like, this is your DH, right? However, like they said, he's arguably the best pure hitter in the game, and his career batting average is .323. Luis Arraez is an entertaining player. Buster Posey has discussed that the Giants are in the memory-making business, and You look at Justin Verlander, like it's a big name and it just gets a lot of attention and some excitement. I don't know how much exactly, but Luis Arráez would bring excitement to the fan base, I think. And he is only under team control for one season, and it is $14 million. And the Padres are looking to shed payroll from what we've heard. And they have a bunch of needs. And just look at their behavior this offseason. They've done nothing. And so sooner or later, something's got to give because, like they say in the piece, the Padres have some needs to fill. And so, anyway, Luis Arraez, like if we look at the defensive numbers, he's played in the recent past, he's played first and second, and he's DH'd. He hasn't played any other position since 2022, so let's ignore those. And at second base in his career, -1 defensive runs saved, but -33 outs above average, so that's alarming. And at first base, and that's in 2,700 innings, at first base in 1,150 innings, -1 defensive runs saved, and -8 outs above average. So to me, that's like first base / DH, and mostly DH. But you could rotate him at first base, and he could play second, like if needed, right? It wouldn't be the greatest thing to have going for you, but the man hits. Like it was a little bit of a down year offensively for him last year with a 109 weighted runs created plus. Excuse me again, my voice gave out. But the previous 2 seasons, it was 130, meaning he was 30% above average. So if we take the last 3 years and combine them, he's been 23% above average offensively, hitting 328 combined in the last 3 seasons with a 371 on base and a 426 slugging. So the slugging looks a little higher than it doesn't actually mean that he hits for a lot of power. Like if you have a 500 batting average and a 500 slugging, it means you hit nothing but singles. So the slugging can be deceiving when your batting average is high or low. So you take the difference between the slugging and the average, and that's more of an indicator of power. And for Arraez, that number in the last 3 seasons is 098, which is below average by a lot. So not a lot of power, but incredible bat to ball skills and batting average skills. His strikeout rate over that span is just 5.6%. That's, I'm certain, the lowest in the game. He also doesn't walk a lot, but he just gets a lot of hits, and they're largely singles. But it's entertaining, and it's a left-handed bat, which I think if you look at the Giants roster and lineup, projected lineup, it goes like Jung-Hoo Lee, who's a lefty, Willy Adames, a righty, LaMonte Wade Jr., a lefty, but a platoon lefty, Matt Chapman, a righty, and then who's after that? You've got this kind of mix of Elliot Ramos, Tyler Fitzgerald, LaMonte Wade Jr., Wilmer Flores, I guess, if he's actually your starting DH against righties, and Patrick Bailey. And so there's a need there. Like I think they could really use a left-handed bat to throw in somewhere in the top 6 spots in their lineup, top 5 actually spots of their lineup, to go along with Wade and Lee. And so I don't know what order exactly you put them in. I like the idea of left, right, left, right, left, right. I put out on Twitter like a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about Arraez, a possible lineup, and a lot of people gave me pushback for the lineup that I put out there. But the concept was to go left, right, left, right, left, right, all the way through the lineup. And it was accomplished, and we had like Arraez batting third or something, and people didn't like that. But you've got 3 kind of low power but high on base potentially. Jung-Hoo Lee, he's got to prove it. Players with Lee, Wade, and Arraez. I'm not saying you've got Arraez, but if you got him, then it would be an interesting mix of players. Like, and I think that Posey would covet a player like Luis Arraez. Like, makes a ton of contact, gritty player. Like when I watch, like when he gets his hits, he's fired up. And, you know, to me, I would love to have him on the Giants and potentially to be a guy that you try to extend beyond 2025. So obviously getting ahead of myself, there's all these questions like, would the Padres even trade with the Giants? Would the Giants even take on $14 million? even if they would and the Padres would, other teams would be in the mix, and would you even get the player? And so all of that, of course, is a factor. But to me, Luis Arráez, among this list that we're going to continue to go through, probably makes more sense than anybody. I think he's underrated. People say, yeah, he doesn't hit for power and he can't defend. He stinks. Batting average stinks, is stupid. I'm like a sabermetric guy. And I'm saying, I think at this point, he's flipped from being overrated to underrated, because putting up those numbers where you're 30% above average offensively 2 seasons in a row, doesn't matter that you're not hitting for power. And it's entertaining as heck to watch a guy go out there and hit 328, So people would enjoy. That's part of this. Is an entertainment game, and he's also produced 7.2 FanGraphs wins above replacement in those 3 seasons. Which, let's just look at the per 600 plate appearances. He's got 1,892 plate appearances over that time. So per 600 plate appearances, it's 2.3 wins above replacement, but he consistently has put up more than 600 plate appearances, but not that much more. So anyway, that's not like superstar production, but it is good production given that you're not getting defensive value or base running value. So that's like all coming with the bat, essentially. And yeah, it's a strange bat where there's not a lot of power, but I think that's even more entertaining than a guy who strikes out 30% of the time and hits like 28 home runs. I want to say 30-something home runs, but Giants haven't had that in forever. But those are also similar to like Pete Alonso projections, 2.5 wins above replacement. And that guy's going to, or at least he wants, like over $100 million. And for Arraez, you're talking about a 1-year rental who probably wouldn't cost all that much in prospect capital, as we call it, because of the fact that he doesn't provide defensive value, doesn't provide base running value, and costs $14 million and is a free agent after the season. So all of those factors going against Arraez, he would cost something, but it wouldn't be like some huge package going back to the Padres. And there's incentive for them, as they wrote on MLB Trade Rumors. They need some players. And so who might those players be? Let's look at what they wrote about what the needs are for the Padres and see, can we make an offer that would get the Giants Luis Arraez? And also I want to look at a couple of Giants that make this top 20 trade candidates list. So we'll get into all of that in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories last year was attending Fenway Park and watching the Giants play the Red Sox. The energy and the excitement were unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I guess it wasn't that recently anymore, I was looking for tickets to the Brewers and Mets wild card finale, which was an amazing game, using the Game Time app. And with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The Super Deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, here we go. We're going to look at what are those needs again for the Padres and who are some other players on this list, including a couple of Giants. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, 3 days a week for now, back to 5 in February, and then 5 until December 2025, 5 days a week. We're here for you every day, except for a couple months in the middle of the winter. Anyway, so as they point out in this article, MLB Trade Rumors top 20 trade candidates. They say that San Diego has needs in left field, in the rotation, on the bench, and at designated hitter. So obviously, if you subtract Arraez, I think he projects as their starting first baseman. That's kind of important to know. Yeah, first base and DH for them. I mean, they do have a need at DH. It's a guy whose name I don't even want to try to pronounce. I know who he is, but his name, Eguy, is his first name, Rosario. And so, yeah, if you take away Arraez, you're creating another hole there. But, the Padres could reallocate that $14 million and get like Justin Turner for much less than that or something to play first. And then you could, in turn, the Giants have young pitching. And so the Padres need starting pitching, which if you look at their rotation, Dylan Cease, Michael King, Yu Darvish, and then Randy Vasquez and Matt Waldron. It's just, it kind of falls off. You have Joe Musgrove had Tommy John surgery in October, early October, actually. So they could definitely use a starting pitcher, especially if they trade a starting pitcher. And so you look at some of the young pitching that the Giants have, and I'm sure that would be intriguing to a team like the Padres, especially if they're high on some of these guys. Like, I don't think you're trading Kyle Harrison for 1 year of a $14 million Luis Arráez, but could I see, whether it's Hayden Birdsong or the Landon Roop or Mason Black, some of these names, Carson Ragsdale, Carson Seymour, Trevor McDonald, Carson Wisenhunt, they could be available here. And I think that if you're thinking there's no way the Padres would give up this player for any of those players, I'm not sure you're right because of the cost. It's not cheap. It's a pretty full price Arraez there at $14 million. Maybe it's discounted, but arbitration, it's just not. It's not like a $3 million Arraez. It's $14 million, and it's only 1 year of team control. That's the most significant factor, is that he's a free agent at the end of the year. And so it's that just, if he had 3 years of team control, it's a totally different story, but it's one. So anyway, I think the Giants do have the pieces to pull it off for sure. And will he be traded? That's the only question. Would they trade with the Giants? That's, I guess, another question. Anyway, wow, my voice keeps falling out. Anyway, the other names on the list, Luis Castillo, I don't see the Giants doing that. Jordan Montgomery, pitcher, don't see them doing that. Christian Vasquez, a catcher, no. Paddock, a pitcher, no. Spencer Torkelson, that would be an interesting guy actually to take a flyer on. Number 1 overall pick, kind of squeezed out of Detroit maybe with the acquisition of Gleyber Torres. So with the Giants in the position they're in, taking a flyer on a player like Torkelson would actually make quite a bit of sense. So could definitely see that. And it's Scott Harris, former Giants GM, running the Tigers. So number 10 on the list is LaMonte Wade Jr. And let's just read what they have to say. It says, the Giants have been looking for ways to add some punch to their lineup. Wade is a solid and affordable bat, earning $5 million in his final year of club control. He's hit .248, .352, .415. That's average on base and slugging in 4 seasons with San Francisco, but Wade doesn't hit lefties well. They're contradicting themselves in the mailbag. Lacks power against righties and is a plodding runner with 7th percentile sprint speed per StatCast. Susan Slusser of the San Francisco Chronicle recently listed Wade as a possible trade piece as the Giants continue to look for a bigger bat in the lineup. Clubs like the Astros, Yankees, and Nats have already filled their needs at first base needs, but others like the Reds and even Wade's former Twins club could plausibly jump into the mix. So, I don't know. I think his sprint speed, it's true, he's slow now, but it has a lot to do with his bad knees. He's not just generally slow, I don't think. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I guess Rhys Hoskins could make some sense. Local guy. Not a good defender, though, at first base, and didn't hit well in Milwaukee last year. But also making a lot more than Arraez, $18 million salary. So the Brewers have to pay some of that down. Alec Boehm, third base, don't need him. Tristan Casas, first baseman, he actually makes a lot of sense and is very interesting. So all that focus on Arraez, but some of these first basemen, Torkelson, Hoskins, if the Brewers paid down, Casas would be particularly interesting as a 25-year-old lefty with huge power. Interesting. And then like a reliever, and then here's another reliever, Camilo Doval. And the write-up on Doval says Doval lost his closer job late in the 2024 season. His walk rate spiked from 9.3% in 2023 to 14.4% in 2024. His ERA accordingly erupted from 293 to 488. Doval still averages better than 99 miles an hour on his cutter, which is actually just a four-seam fastball. However, and misses bats in droves. He fanned 28.8% of opponents, even in a down 2024, showing and recorded a massive 14.5% swinging strike rate that largely mirrored his 2023 levels. Doval is earning $4.525 million this season and is controllable for 3 years. Teams are often loath to sell low on this type of power arm, but Slusser reported in that same previously mentioned piece that Doval has drawn interest from clubs looking for a closer. The Giants could move him and justifiably ask for MLB talent in return. So that's what makes him actually like potentially a plausible trade candidate, because with the salary being low, $10 million less than Arraez, and the team control being 3 more years versus 1 for Arraez, Doval, even though he ranks lower on this list, is a more valuable piece to me in a trade than Luis Arráez. And like they write here, the Giants could justifiably ask for MLB talent in return. So the fact that Ryan Walker had such a good showing as the closer and just as a reliever in general and looks to have a firm grasp on that role. I don't think he allowed a run once he took over the closer's role. Pretty, not that late in the season. He went like a couple months, I think, without allowing a run. And that if you can get something of value where you're getting an offensive piece that is either somewhat impact or pretty good and under team control for multiple years, it's something you would consider. So just wanted to mention that Doval and Wade make that list. Other players, there's none that make a ton of sense for me. And Mike Yastrzemski makes the honorable mentions list as the third name listed, just for what it's worth. So that's my take on MLB Trade Rumors top 20 trade candidates list. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on YouTube or send me a message in reply to the post on Twitter. And that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a ton, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again either on Thursday or Friday, unsure at this point. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.